Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 1, Episode 7. It is 1 p.m, and this is a spoiler review, of course, and it's also a Patreon-sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So, things take a dark... I mean, not that there's been no dark storylines or hints of a dark storyline before, but things definitely get the darkest of being up front, I would say, at this point, and still very much fitting into the theme of parents and the parents and kids and like the relationship of like one looking after the other and kind of all the things on that spectrum. And this one takes it to the sort of the extreme like worst case scenario basically of that, which is a parent who is abusive of their kid. And I think this storyline, which largely is revolving around Santos is the one who talks to the mother. So there was a patient who came in last time. Well, I think it was last episode. Maybe he's been around for a couple of episodes, but he is the one who fell off a ladder and got injured, and he's on like various machines right now, but he's going to be fine. However, one of the things they noticed when they were checking him out was that he had like more breast tissue than he should, or he had enlarged breasts. And when Santos mentions this to the mother, she reveals that she'd been giving him something to try and kill his libido, his sex drive. And it takes kind of a serious turn where she straight up ends the scene by saying that she thinks that he is up to something with their daughter. And she's basically been trying to curb that with taking away sex drive. So I mean, it's a really obviously dark path to go down, right? It's like I said, the worst case scenario of like the parent-child relationship kind of coming to light. As we go on, we get a bit more kind of an idea of like how far it's went so far and in what part of the process it's in. I think it's very clear by the end of this episode that Santos herself has some real experience with this, as in she is probably a victim of abuse herself. And it seems like it's a very personal thing for her when she's like going after this and she really wants something to be done about it and encounters various roadblocks along the way. One, that there's not really any proof of anything yet unless the daughter opens up about it, and the mum's not even spoken to the daughter about it yet. She's just suspecting it herself. And also the fact that the mother, because she was doing this, giving him this drug without his knowledge and his like coffee every day, she's actually committed a crime. What she's been doing is illegal, and she'll probably have to go through some process because of that. Obviously, Robbie and whoever else are sympathetic to what they're hearing, but they know that their hands are tied and they can't really do anything, and Santos doesn't really want to accept that. Which leads to a couple of scenes with Santos that I find particularly tense, actually, and cringy, and in the sense that I was really worried about where it was going, because I felt like Santos is going to do something she shouldn't. And we've already had a situation with her where she was too headstrong and made a mistake, and she's felt kind of bad about that. This felt like she might cross a line in a different way that might get her into some serious trouble. Now, admittedly, her motivations here, her goals are obviously completely noble and very much well intentioned. So there's never like a problem with her character, but the scene where she notices the daughter in this family standing by herself and decides to go and talk to her, I immediately got like a knot in my stomach, because I'm like, oh god, what are you going to say? Especially since it is just speculation. What if she says something to the kid and then later it turns out that there isn't anything going on and it's more innocent than maybe it seemed? And maybe that's like, wishful thinking or whatever, but I was worried that this storyline was leading up to her learning a harsh lesson and overstepping. I really thought this was building to her getting into some serious trouble, and like the expectation of her, like just the idea that she's going to go over and try and broach this subject with the child when the mother's not even spoken to the kid about this yet. It did feel like she was like stepping out of line. Like, again, well intentioned, but like this is really something that the mother should be talking to her about first. But Santos is taking it upon herself, and this is also where I started to suspect, I think she's got, obviously she kind of spells it out by the end of the episode, but this is where I started to think, I feel like she is experienced some of this herself, and so really hard hitting. And that's conversation with the little girl. I say little girl, she's like, I don't know, they say she's in high school, so she must be at least like 15. But that conversation where she is just making small talk and saying, "Oh, are you close with your dad?" And like the questions are fine up until that point. Like she's saying things that are very normal, very expected, nothing out of the realm of possibility. And then out of nowhere, without really any kind of like pivoting to it or like easing into it, she just says, "Has your dad ever made you feel uncomfortable?" Which is a weird question because up until that point, it's all been about her asking about her dad coming home. Is he going to be here long? Is he going to be okay? It's a very, she very much steers the conversation, Santos, to where she wants it to go, and you can feel the tires screeching and turning as she does it. So it does feel quite, pit of your stomach when we start going down that path. And this is the thing, like, she mentions that she knows the dad goes in when she's in the shower, right? He comes into the bathroom and like gives her massages. Like that's what the mother said. And the fact that she's bringing that up is going to let the daughter know that someone's told her that, right? That the mother's said that. So she might even be causing a rift between her and her mother for a start. But it's very uncomfortable, and the girl gets uncomfortable and just says she's going to go find her mum, and the conversation ends. And Santos is, again, very well intentioned, but there is nothing comfortable about this. And even as well intentioned as it is, you kind of feel like she is overstepping here. Now, it doesn't actually lead to, because I thought there was going to be blowback from this. I thought this was going to get back to the mum, and the mum was going to raise a fuss, and it was going to almost be a very heightened version of what we've seen a few times so far this season. Like when like Javadi tried to talk to the homeless lady, and it kind of just instantly blew up, and it was overstepping. I was wondering if this was going to be like a bigger, more extreme version of that. Now, that's not quite what happens. It doesn't get back to the mom, at least not yet. It probably will later, admittedly. But Robbie and Nat have to tell the mum, look, what you did was illegal. We've heard about this conversation, and we have to contact the police about it. We have to bring them in this. Which obviously, Santos is immediately thinking, wait, if the mother's taken away for some time, that leaves the daughter with the father. So if there is that very serious thing going on, then we're putting her in even more peril. Like, the person who's there who might be blocking a lot of the potential crimes is going to be absent. So she really kicks up a fuss here, and is like, really, we're not going to do anything. And, she's basically told, like, they can't, right? There's no proof. The social services lady tries to, like, say if she wants to talk, and she's like, I'm not the one that needs to talk. She clearly still does need to talk about it, right? That's pretty clear. But it's, it leaves it on this very open place, and then while she definitely was overstepping talking to the kid, she decides to take it upon herself. The big climax to this plotline, at least in this episode, I assume this is it done now, but who knows, is that she goes in to talk to the dad, who is awake now, but he's like all hooked up to machines. He can't talk. He's kind of vulnerable. And she specifically brings the security guard to stand at the door. Is kind of like hey, that guy can come in and arrest you. And she basically just says, I know what's going on, and describes everything she's heard, and makes it very clear she's been through some of this, and sort of describes some of these actions. It's a very powerful scene, because this actor who's playing the dad is having to just sort of like look up when he can't move, and it's all in his eyes. So that makes it quite compelling from just watching the reactions. It's also like an interesting power imbalance, because typically he's the one preying on someone else with his power of his position of being the adult, of being the father, and here Santos is wielding her new power as a doctor while he's vulnerable to try and do something about it. So it seems like she gets away with this, and obviously that's a good thing. This is maybe about as happy as an ending as perhaps we could have hoped for, based on what this plotline was. But she was definitely taking a big risk doing this. She basically gambles and calls a big bluff to make him quit. Basically says that, you're going to like stop going near your daughter, you're going to stop thinking about her, and if you do go near her, like, this guy out here is going to arrest you, and like, everything's going to be reported, and I'll come after you. And like, we have heard in all of her scenes with the other characters is how technically powerless they are to do anything about it until the daughter's actually made a complaint, is formally said something's happened. So she doesn't actually have any power right now in the legal sense, in the real world sense. But in a threatening physical manner, she does have a lot of power in the moment itself. And I think her hope is that this is going to be scary enough that, he will abide by what she's saying, and he'll be scared that someone's figured it out. And I think that's the main thing here that probably puts the fear of death into him, is that this is probably the very first time that anyone has ever called him out in what he's doing. And I mean, he probably wasn't even aware that anyone had noticed it yet, or that anyone was, because if he hasn't actually, gone all the way yet, if he's only just like inching up to eventually acting something out, because Santos kind of describes the evolution of the events. First it's just these little massages, it's a kiss in the head, then it moves to a kiss in the lips, so on and so on, until it eventually gets to the actual full-on assault. And it feels like this might put the fear in him because someone's aware of what he is now. No one's ever known he is this, or that he has these feelings, and now someone does. So I think this is a gamble, and it might still not technically work in the long run. We really have no idea of knowing unless the show comes back and tells us one way or the other. But it does feel like a big dramatic moment to end this plotline on. It does feel like a relatively happy ending for what we can achieve in one episode with this. I think it's an interesting character beat from Santos, who, after this, it definitely feels like, pardon me, that she's probably had the most development out of the young characters. Maybe not the most screen time. Whittaker's had a lot of time himself, but this has definitely been like a big development for her. And I think you can maybe argue a little bit that, she is kind of doing a lot of this because of her personal history, and that she is, I don't want to say taking satisfaction in being able to make these threats. Although I'm sure she is a little bit, just in a natural sense. But, I think she does care about the kid. I think the intentions are almost entirely, completely, good, right? This is all about protecting someone who's a victim, and she's doing that as someone who's went through it, and she's looking out for someone who might go through the same thing, right? Which actually thematically links into when Robbie is talking to the parents of the dead teenager, and they're trying to convince the mum to let them use the organs, right? Because he was an organ donor, he had that card, and he's like, hey, he'll be able to save other people so that these other parents won't have to go through what you're going through today. It kind of feels like Santos is kind of putting that a little bit into practice herself with her tackling this. But obviously what she's doing here is highly unethical as a doctor, right? It's highly illegal in a lot of ways, but obviously we, the audience, can get behind her in what she's actually trying to achieve here, and it seems to have worked. He at least blinks appropriately to indicate that he is going to go along with what she said. So yeah, big plotline for her. Probably the darkest, sort of most gut-wrenching plotline of the show so far. There's been a lot of sad plots, obviously, but this is a little bit darker. This is a little bit more uncomfortable, this plot, I would say. So that was definitely the main focus, I would say, of this episode. It's definitely the plotline that stuck out the most. There's a lot of other things going on, though, as well. We have an autistic patient who Langdon has a hard time dealing with because he doesn't know how to talk to them. And notably, when King looks at the chart for the patient and she points out that he's autistic, Langdon says, oh, I saw it, but it has nothing to do with the fact that he's hurt his ankle, which is technically correct, but obviously it's showing that he didn't consider that he would have to handle the patient, talk to the patient in a different way. Whereas King, who points out that her sister is on the spectrum, she is able to go in and kind of like put him at ease, and just she understands the things that are probably upsetting him, the loud noises, the bright lights, and is able to kind of talk in a way that he'll respond, in a way that he will open up and sort of describe the pain. Whereas Langdon's like, he's not fitting to the script. How do I deal with this patient? And I think what's sweet about this plot more than anything, I mean, I think it's well handled in the subject. I think sometimes when characters who are meant to be autistic on TV or movies can feel a little bit, like, is this problematic? I don't know if they're handling this with care. Not only is it handled with care, from what I can tell, it does seem to be a very kind of positive message about this. And I think the nice part of this plot is at the end of their story, Langdon comes to King after trying to, speak to the patient as he's leaving, and makes a little joke and has a nice little interaction with him. It feels like he's grown a little bit, Langdon. He comes to King and basically says, hey, you taught me something today. He kind of gives her that, he gives her that little win. That she's doing a good job, she's making a great first impression, but she's even taught one of their doctors who, I think it's this idea, I mean, we've definitely had this vibe in past episodes that all the doctors in some way are still learning from each other. It's a constant learning experience. You don't just learn how to be a doctor, and then that's that you stop. At least in this type of practice, right? When you're doing emergency room stuff, there's always specific conditions, specific injuries, and set circumstances that are wildly different, or like a lot of them will fit into a box that they always fit into, but every so often there's one weird one and they have to try something a bit more creative, and they're always kind of learning from each other, and the senior doctors obviously know more, but even they can still learn something. So there was a nice kind of idea there, which again maybe further even ties into this theme of parents and kids. It's just in this case it's not a parent and a child, it's a it's a new student doctor and their superior. And this idea that the young person can still teach the old person something, which they actually kind of hint at in a little jokey way. At one point, Evans is looking for Robbie, and she says, "Where's the sad boy? Where's that sad boy at?" Which I didn't understand either, to be fair. So I'm not as young as I once was. But she says that she's using the Zoomer, the Gen Z words to for some reason. But it just kind of jokingly fits into that idea of the young generation teaching the older generation something, and you've got that, so that's nice. And then that also fits in to the storyline about the teenage pregnant girl who is hidden in the bathroom at the end of last episode, eventually is let out to hide in another room. The mother wants to leave, and it's kind of just a stalemate for most of the episode, but ultimately it comes down to Collins talking to the mother and basically just saying, look, you had her when you were very young and it was a nightmare and scary, but you ended up thinking she was the best thing that ever happened to you. However, she is telling you that she doesn't, our world's ending. That's how she's reacting to this. She is terrified. And if you push her away, she might never come back. And I think that's ultimately seems to be the wake-up call the mum needed, is this idea that her relationship with her daughter might never be repaired if she makes her go through with this. And we actually don't see like a big conversation between them. We don't see like the mother telling the daughter she's changed her mind. We just later on in the episode we cut to them and she's taking the first medication for her abortion, and it's it's a little bit dour, and Collins jokes about how the car ride home is going to be a very long trip, but ultimately the outcome is kind of what was desired in the first place. And again, it's this idea of the parent listening to the kid, that sometimes the kid needs to be listened to instead of the other way around, right? And that even fits in a little bit to what Robbie's going through in this episode with Samira. Samira's got a patient here who comes in and is acting very erratic. I mean, I don't want to say crazy, but yeah, acting kind of crazy. And she turns out she's an influencer, and she's been having like these weird spells and confusion for like a month. She seems kind of paranoid in some ways. And they have a conversation, a bunch of them, about like, oh, is this a schizophrenia? Is this a bunch of what physical things could it be? They rule a bunch of things out, and Robbie's ready halfway through the episode to hand her off to psychiatrics, and like it's not our problem anymore. We can't do anything. And Samira feels that there's still something maybe isn't right. That there's still something physical going on. And it's actually Collins who says to her, "Hey, trust your gut. I'll back you up with Robbie if he gives you shit." And she ends up basically realizing what might be the culprit here is something that she is using for her beauty skincare routine, right? She's an influencer, does makeup stuff. Are you using stuff from other countries? And that kind of ends up being a lead to what might be going on here. We don't really get like an outright conclusion to it this episode, but it seems like she's going down the right path. And Robbie doesn't react well to this. He says, never do that again, never like go to another doctor to approve something over my head. And he also makes it clear to Collins, you are not over my head, for the record. I'm your superior, and kind of pulls rank on her a little bit. He's getting kind of pissy. He also goes to the bathroom again this episode. That's 2 bathroom trips for Robbie, if everyone's counting. And 1 sandwich for Whitaker, who eats all over Robbie's desk, which he then gets mad about, and again gets snappy. So he is very snappy. He's kind of acknowledging that he's a little bit harsh today, but he's also not very good once Collins really pulls him up on it and tells him to, let Samira trust her instinct. She's getting hesitant because you're making her feel bad, blah, 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 blah. And it's, again, it's this idea of like, well, he obviously, there's a reason why he's in the position he's in, and he's very good at what he does, right? He is very wise. He knows his shit. He's telling people what to do. He's giving good advice. But once in a while, like, yeah, maybe he should be trusting the person who's younger than him to help. It seems to be a really big recurring theme in these. I think this is the first episode though where I've kind of connected it to the senior staff and the medical students, and that mirroring the parents and the kids stuff from all the patients. Because there's been a lot of that in some form or another. You've got the old woman whose daughter's disappeared because she doesn't want to take care of her anymore, seemingly. You've got the mom and the son who might turn out to be some kind of dangerous person because he's got a hit list. And you've got, the pregnancy storyline. You've got, the adult children taking care or saying goodbye to their old parents. You've got young parents saying goodbye to their relatively young kids. You've got all these like different variations of this same kind of idea. And what can they learn from each other? Seems like a big running theme in this season. At least it feels that way to me based on what's been in this episode. And of course, there is a sad ending to this in this episode. Collins, and I'm not surprised at this. I think when she was looking on the phone last episode about that pram she was going to buy, and she was all excited about it, that was kind of the moment I thought, oh, something's not going to be happy about this. She's too happy about this pregnancy right now. It's going to lead to something bad. And that's just like a meta writing thing where I'm like, she's too happy, something bad's going to happen. And this episode does indeed end with her having pains, going to the bathroom, and looking down at her underwear and seeing blood. I like this moment and how it was presented, because I think it's interesting this is a character who, like, don't get me wrong, I think most women in this situation, right, they're pregnant, they see this, they feel this pain, and they see that. I feel like most women kind of have a good idea that something's very, very wrong, and that this is probably a miscarriage of some kind, right? But that's where their mind is going to jump to anyway. I think there's power here in that we've got a character in Collins who has a better idea because she is literally a doctor, right? She is literally a doctor. And I think the reaction that I liked was the way she like punches the wall of the cubicle in the bathroom, because that to me felt like not just a panic, right? Because I think a regular person for the most part will cry, will panic, will be scared. I think she's obviously still upset. She is crying, but she's punching the wall in frustration because she knows what this means. She has a good idea what it means anyway, because she has the expertise. So I thought it was an interesting reaction. And there was definitely an element of like frustration there, which does make me wonder if this is the first time she's been pregnant, and maybe it's not the first time that it's not went well. I'm just speculating there based on the fury as she punches the wall. Like, it didn't seem like, oh, this is a shock, this is happening. It's upsetting and I'm pissed, almost as if it's happened again. And I'm not sure if that, I might be barking up the wrong tree with that. It may just be more of a case of she understands this better, so she's more angry at it than other people would be. I thought that was an interesting way it played out in that final scene. So that was very good. That was most of the main storylines this episode. Like, there's the little updates on various things. Like I said, the teenager who died, like, he's got a lot of friends that are hanging around now. And then the parents are still talking about the organ donating card, like I said. And that's all playing out very fine. Robbie has another one of his little flashback moments to a few years ago when the other doctor died. And he kind of, really snaps out. It seemed like there was a moment where he had to accept that they had to give up the machines, the ventilators or whatever, because a 12-year-old needed them, so he's remembering that moment in this episode. So, we'll see. Actually, there was one uplifting plot, and maybe this was intentionally in this episode to try and take your mind off all the darker stuff and the other plot lines. And that is that the Good Samaritan that had helped the Asian lady who fell on the train tracks, or sorry, I should say, was pushed onto the train tracks, he wakes up. He's better, right? And he's helped breathing, and he's still getting, but he's going to be okay, right? He's in a stable position. And when he wakes up, he asks about the lady he helped. And he also says, hey, have they caught the guy who did it? Because obviously he's been out of it since he helped her because he got hurt. He's like, I saw him push her, like, I can help. And he wants to speak to the police. He wants to give a statement, and it's all very good. But the important thing is, though, is that he asked to see her. And they're like, yeah, we can arrange that. So we get this really sweet scene where they wheel their beds together, and Like, they introduce each other with their names, and that's basically all they can really understand because they don't speak, their languages with each other. And she gives him like this pendant kind of thing, and he just sort of says, I'm going to help them get who did this. I'm going to, help. And I don't think she can really understand, but she smiles at him, and it's just a very sweet scene, and the camera cuts around the other characters as they also smile. It's a very uplifting, just feel-good moment. As much as obviously what happened to her was out of hate, and that was a really bad thing, this felt like a really heartwarming little beat that, again, I think is specifically in this episode to counteract all of the dark stuff with the father-daughter plot that Santos is dealing with. I think that's a very smart choice to give us this uplifting thing in the middle of all that, because that isn't by far the darkest thing. Now, admittedly, that kid with the hit list might end up making things darker later. It's very possible. But that's where we're at right now. This has definitely been, the worst place we've been at, just in terms of how dark the storylines have been. So, yeah, that was a really nice sequence. Hard to get mad at that. And, there was definitely characters, again, who took a back seat this episode, and I don't think that's a bad thing. There's very little Mackay. She's in that scene where they're introducing these two people together, but she, is just there in a couple of scenes. She's not got her own plot line, and I think that's good. Not because I dislike her, I think she's great, but it just, because she got some focus before, it feels nice to really focus in on a couple of key characters. It feels like Robbie always gets some focus because he's kind of wrangling everyone, but this very much felt like Santos in the A plot and Samira in the B plot, and then everyone else was kind of just little updates, even though Collins gets the big moment at the end, of course, but maybe we'll see she had the C plot, if you want to call it that. But it feels like they're focusing in a little bit more. Now that we've introduced the characters, we get to know them a little bit from the first 5 episodes. It feels like these last 2 episodes in particular have really honed in and said, this episode's going to focus on these 2 or 3, and then this 2 or 3. And I think that's good because it really gives them a bit more meat in their storylines. And I don't think you could have given the Santos plot this much time back in episode 3 because it was cutting around too many groups of characters. It feels like a very conscientious choice to do that, and I think it's maybe benefiting the character rating a little bit as a result. So that's good. That's good stuff. But yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts on episode 7 of The Pitt. So we're kind of hitting the mid point of the season, right? Next episode's the middle episode. So we'll be curious to see how that fares, and we'll get into everything else when the time comes. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that usual stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do, as does supporting financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. Thanks to everyone who already does, but it does help keep all the reviews coming, and thank you for joining me. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?